Welcome to Growing Startups, where we talk to growth leaders and marketing professionals about how to drive sustainable growth from the ground up. I'm your host, Evelyn, and I lead marketing for tech startups. I'm excited to share these candid conversations about marketing, culture, collaboration, and everything else that makes startups grow. I'm joined today by Brandy, who I'm really excited to talk to. She's an amazing brand strategist and has a background in community-oriented startups like Shake Shack, Groove, and So Far Sounds, which is actually how we met. And she's also started her own branding agency for startups called Brand by Brandy. Awesome name, by the way. I feel like it really lent itself to you being in this field. So, Brandy, could you maybe give us a super quick intro of who you are and a little bit about what you do at Brand by Brandy?
Yeah, I like to joke that I either would have ended up in brand strategy or like having my own distillery, a brandy distillery based on my name. But I ended up here on the brand strategy side of things. Maybe one day, distillery. But yeah. So yeah, I started my career working mostly in-house at early stage community-oriented startups, which spanned from hospitality like Shake Shack to music with So Far Sounds, and then also with Groove, which was a co-working app. So they span industries, but really the through line through my career is this passion for working with solutions towards social connection or community building or hospitality and interaction. And even now working for myself, I mostly gravitate towards startups that are somehow related to community or community building. And I've been working for myself for about 3 to 4 years now with my own brand strategy studio, as you said. And then I also now have a joint venture with a designer where we also, when people have some visual identity needs, they can also come there for like a holistic brand identity. So that one's called the Office of Beloved Brands, but that's a new venture that we're kind of testing out.
I love that. That sounds really interesting. And I think just the topic of brand for early stage startups is a really good one to talk about because there's so much to say on it. And, some startups really invest in brand and then others don't really see the value of branding until later on. So I'm really excited to get into our conversation, but I like to start these episodes first with just a quick favorite wellness practice or ritual that you use to keep yourself grounded.
I think one of the best wellness practices is having a dog because I feel like dogs that get you outside. You have to take pauses during your day. Sometimes I'm like at the computer and I'm like, oh gosh, I have to take her for a walk. But actually it's like a really good thing to have to leave and get off your computer and go take the dog for a walk. So yeah, I would say I have a big St. Bernard. She's 4 years old, Penny. And I would say the daily walks with Penny are like my favorite wellness ritual. And we moved recently to the beach here in Brazil at Taparachi. And so we take her to the beach every morning for a walk. And what better way to start your day than getting outside in nature and seeing a dog run around?
Honestly, if my dog was listening, he's in the other room right now, he would be so jealous because the beach is like his favorite place. And to be able to do that every day sounds awesome. Having a dog really does like require you to actually leave the house and take breaks, which sometimes I'm like, oh my God, you have to go out again. But then I'm actually so happy that I get to take that break. So I totally agree with you. And you have such a cute dog too. Every picture I see, I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, I'm biased, but she is very cute.
No, I can concur. All right, well, I love that wellness practice, and I think a lot of people will relate to it. Let's get into our conversation. So first off, just from like an early stage startup perspective, I've seen some startups that really invest in branding pretty early on, maybe even before they've hired their first full-time marketer. And then others, I feel like they kind of just hack things together in the beginning, which is also a way to do it. But from what you've seen, like how important do you think branding is? And at what stage of a startup should they be thinking about, investing in branding?
It's a good question. It's been a big topic of conversation the last few years too, because financing has changed so much in startups, and I feel like when the money changes, obviously, then like the priorities change, or people have to figure out and get a lot more specific with their marketing priorities and what they're spending on. So one of the things that I always like to say is that I think that branding is kind of like misunderstood also of what exactly it is. So for me, I've thought a lot about it, like what is branding, what is brand, what is brand strategy? And there's all these definitions out there. But for me, I always come back to that it's just resonance. Does my product and what I'm making resonate with the target customer? And so I think if you look at it like that, it's like, well, that's very important from the beginning, because who's ever even going to try your product if it doesn't resonate with them and they don't see themselves and their pain point and their problem in it? That doesn't necessarily mean you have to go spend $50,000 to $100,000 on like a fancy brand identity with the whole like visual toolkit and everything. But I do think you need to think about, how am I getting across what this is to people and what it does in a way that like appeals to them both rationally and emotionally. So on the emotional side, maybe it is the visual identity, maybe it is the tone of voice and how the brand is showing up. But then maybe it's also the rational side, which is like, do I have this positioning in a good place? Am I explaining correctly, like what makes this different from other solutions? Am I being really clear? Is it speaking to the right target customer? I feel like all of that is brand. And so I think that it's essential from the beginning, but it might not be like the whole total package that people think about when they think about a brand, like fancy colors and logo and photos and everything.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting way to think about it. It's really how you feel when you think about a brand. Like what comes to mind? How do you feel when you like encounter their content or you're on their website? It's a lot deeper than just like having some colors that you use every single time when you create something. So as a first time hire, like first marketing hire at startups, this has definitely been like I've definitely had different situations where either I come in and they kind of, expect to like me to build the brand out a little bit better, or like look at what they've done in the past and then, try to like fit what I'm doing into that. And then other places that I've been at have already a really clear like brand guide, which is always such a nice thing coming into a startup, because there's so much you have to do from the get-go, and you obviously want to prove the importance of marketing, the value of marketing, and it's so much easier to do when you already have that kind of core brand identity to work with. So I feel like it can be very minimal too. Like I don't really just need like our fonts, I have like prompts, for example, for our imagery to like create new things in Midjourney that are all very brand aligned. And then our colors and like general language. What do you recommend for startups that want to invest in brand a little bit, kind of like get those, foundations of brand ready? Do they have to like do a lot, or do you think a pretty like minimal approach can work as well?
Yeah, honestly, it depends. But I would say something that I encounter a lot is that founders, and I'll speak directly to founders because that's usually who, usually early stage startups are not too big of a team yet. They have thought a lot about brand, but maybe they haven't gotten it to a place where it's like very usable for once like the team is going to grow or they're going to bring on contractors or freelancers. Like, for example, something I see a lot is that people are like, oh, we need help with social media. And so they want to go hire like a social media manager, whether that's freelance or full time, but they haven't actually like gotten down on paper, like what is our tone of voice? What is the overall personality? Like maybe not even maybe they don't even have the colors or the like image direction or things like that. And so it's like, well, what is that social media manager going to do? They're going to come in and like have to figure that out, or they're going to be putting out content that like isn't that strong because it's not really tied to like the overarching brand and the overarching goals. and is maybe more reactive to like vanity metrics, like trying to get a bunch of views on a reel. And maybe that's like not even that important to the overall goal. So I think it's like having a strategy in place before you are going out and doing like all this execution and marketing. So I would say, going back to, how should people think about the foundations? A lot of founders, they have thought about all this stuff. They've thought about how to describe the product, and a lot of them have like a personality in mind, but they don't necessarily have it down on paper in a very organized way. I always feel like I come in and the founders, I do this big brand briefing with these questions, and they give me a lot of information. It's like very rare that someone would get that brand briefing and be like, I don't know how to fill this out. I don't have answers to any of this. That's like extremely rare. And so then my job, as I see it, is like take all of that and make something usable and something that has that like marketing point of view as well, that they can then go out and use in the day-to-day, or they can like pass off to someone that they might be bringing in. So I always feel like that's like a good investment. Is like, is there someone who can take all this stuff you've already been thinking about and just bring it to life a little bit more in a way that's like very usable? So even on like, if you think about the visual side of things, like a really good designer will come in and make it like more polished, or maybe suggest, maybe go in this direction a little bit more. It's going to look even better. Not necessarily like a whole like refresh or something like that. So yeah, basically like that outside expertise of like, here's everything you've been thinking about, and here's a way to make it like more usable in the day-to-day. Because I think that's also one of the biggest problems is founders don't always want to invest in brand because they're like, oh, it's a nice to have. It's like this nice brand deck that I'm given, and then I never open it up again. It feels removed from the day-to-day, but it actually should be informing and making all the day-to-day decisions like way easier.
You also mentioned what I found interesting is, talking about like hiring a social media manager, for example, and having your brand voice or your tone already ready to go. I'm curious from your perspective as well, like who should startups hire first? I think, sometimes they hire specialists like a social media manager or more of a generalist. From the companies that you've worked with, what do you think works well, or is it different for different startups?
Yeah. I know if I had to say, I think that someone should, if they're like, what is my first marketing hire? I think they should hire a generalist, because I think that the early days of marketing and building a company, it's so much experimentation and so much throwing things at the wall and seeing what works, and should we go in this direction, or no, let's go in this one. And so, I mean, I've also been like the first marketing hire that's more oriented towards brand versus like growth and performance. And, was I like necessarily the best person in that role? I don't know. I think I did my best, but I think like someone who's like a true generalist is a good idea, because you don't know, like you might find out that like, oh yes, actually like SEO is the main thing for us, or like actually organic social is the thing for us. And then that person needs to be able to not necessarily do it themselves, but be able to then go like hire someone and from there that can specialize in it. But they have to like recognize that that is the way to go. I almost think it's like, I almost feel like the, growth marketing got like so popular there for a few years. I guess it still is. I almost feel like the first marketing hire should be called like experimenter, like head of experimenting, because it's so much like testing and experimenting and like these little tiny tests, and it really is just like seeing what sticks. And every company is different, every market is different, like every year is different. So I feel like it whatever worked for you at another company isn't like guaranteed to work at another one.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Definitely in the beginning, you're just experimenting a bunch. And for me, as someone who's kind of in that type of role right now, having a like solid brand to work with when you're experimenting on all these things just makes everything so much more seamless. Like every piece of content that I need to create, or every like new platform that we're testing, just having that really solid identity to start from makes like experimenting so much easier too. As well as I think, I feel like when a marketing person comes in, they also oftentimes help revamp the rest of the business in a way, like making sure that, all the logos are updated everywhere, both internally and externally, or kind of redoing the sales materials that they're using, creating one pagers, or helping customer success with kind of creating a cohesive brand experience as well. I think that's something that's really tough to do in the beginning because you have these different departments kind of figuring things out as they go, and the brand experience kind of gets lost in that because people just need to move really fast. So I think, yeah, that's like another piece that I'm super passionate about, is like making sure that the customer, from the first time they see anything about the company to like the very last thing that they're doing in our product, should all feel very cohesive. I don't know if you've like worked with companies where that's a big like focus of theirs, or something that you try to tell them that's important.
Well, it's funny because when I was starting off, like how many, over a decade ago, you saw a lot more marketing and comms roles. That's what a lot of my roles were, was like marketing and communications together. And then I feel like things started to get more specialized and specific. And so you don't, and in a lot of ways that marketing and comms role was very generalist, but also I think the comms part was an important aspect of it because it encapsulated that, what you're saying, like what are the people at customer success, with people dealing directly with customers, saying, all the way up to like, what are we doing in PR, and like the founder, what is the founder talking about? And so I do feel like that's like a piece that's missing these days when people just hire like a head of marketing, or like a, I don't know, head of growth marketing or something like that. Like things are more like specialized now, and the comms piece is often left out. And I think there's a big overlap between comms and brand as well. Like a lot of times people will move between it or have experience in both. So that's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that in a while. But you definitely see this like specialization more, or like this very more specific. I would say there has been a rise in like product marketing. I feel like you see way more product marketing roles now. And I think sometimes those people or positions are doing what like marketing and comms used to be, because with product marketing, you do have to think about the comms piece a little bit. But it's very different from like overarching brand and comms. And I know some of this is just part of like natural development of these roles, and one company hires someone and they do really well, and then every company copies that.
Yeah.
Because I think every company wants like a roadmap of like, here's exactly who you should be hiring at what time. But it is interesting. I hadn't thought about that like those like generalist marketing and comms roles, I rarely see those anymore.
Yeah, I guess that's like another reason to try to hire someone who's a generalist, or at least like very eager to learn different types of marketing, even if they haven't, really focused on that before. Especially, I feel like now there's so much out there for founders as well to look at and think like, oh, maybe this is the strategy I need to go for, or like we need to do paid ads. Like that's what's going to work, but without really having experimented with it. And then you hire someone who's, like a performance marketer who's really like specialized in that and is great at their job, but maybe that's not the channel that's actually like your biggest advantage, and you just, haven't experimented enough. So yeah, marketing and comms, I don't even know if I've seen any roles pop up recently that have that name.
No, you never see that. And if it is, like, if you do see it, they're just talking about social media.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. You also mentioned how the founder talks about the company, and I think that kind of can lead us into another thing that I've been thinking about a lot. And I think a lot of founders are thinking about this, and companies, is, the kind of like personal branding piece, and using the founder story to, I guess, like market the brand. That's like a whole own marketing channel right there. I know that you've kind of been doing some stuff in that space. Do you feel like it's becoming like more and more of a thing that startups really want to try to do?
It's definitely becoming a lot more of a topic of conversation in this age of personal branding and creators, and everything is like way more oriented around people. Even the algorithms, like LinkedIn, they surface posts from people a lot more than posts from company pages. So it's definitely top of mind. You're also seeing a lot more blending, right? Where there's this rise in people like me who work for themselves. And so you have personal branding, but then it's like also my work and services. And so it's like this interesting blend of like, well, I have a company, but it's like me out in front because like ultimately they're hiring me as a person. And so it's bleeding a lot more. I mean, I guess that's always been a part of startups as well. Like when you think about the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Steve Jobs of the world, right? But it goes through different phases too, because then there was like that whole period where there were all the women founders, like Audrey Gelman of The Wing and like the Away founders and Glossier and all of those. And it was really, really big, the founder branding and the founder out in front. But then there was like all this backlash to those companies and those women. And so then a lot of founders got nervous, especially women founders, about being front and center. But now I feel like it's swinging back. Like I feel like it swings depending on like how these founders are getting treated in the public and the press as well. Because ultimately, like it is about like a human is leading the company. So the way that I approach it is, if the founder wants to be out in front or if they feel comfortable about it, cool, let's like figure that out. But I also have clients where they're like, I don't want to be in front at all. I don't want to post on social media. I have no interest in it for whatever reasons, you know? And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to push you to like be the face of this brand then. So I kind of put it in like 3 buckets. This is how I've been thinking about it lately, is like you have the like completely like founder-led branding, which I would say is like the Steve Jobs, the Elon Musk, where they like really, really want to be in the spotlight. They are super comfortable. I'm trying to think of like what a current day version would be of like a startup, but like they're really, really comfortable. It's like they were meant to be in like theater or something because they just like flock to it. That's rare to find. And then in the middle, which I think is more common, is you have founders who are like, I know that I'm beneficial to this company because like people want to see a person, they want to know the story. People buy from people. It helps build up the trust. I can go out and do like speeches or talk to the press and it'll like help the company. But I probably need a little bit of training. I probably need a little bit of guidance and like what to talk about on social media. I would say that's where like the bulk of people fit. You also see some people have preferences. They're like, you know, oh, I don't mind being active on LinkedIn, but like I want to keep my Instagram private. And so I always try to like respect, you know, what people feel comfortable with. And then you have, like I said, the people who are like, I don't want to be out in front at all. I don't want to do anything. I don't feel comfortable with it. I want it to be the company that's front and center. And so I think there are ways to work with that as well, because I always say no one should like be forced to do anything that they don't want to do, because it's ultimately a long game, right? And like if you're going to have to go up there and post on social media once a week, it's like, I don't want you to do that for like 2 months and then stop, you know, because you hate it so much. And so I think that it should ultimately be like what's sustainable, that works for the company, but also me as a human, because like I am a human, even though I'm like the founder of this company, you know?
I think the interesting part of that is that people connect with people. It's, you know, much easier to connect with a person than a brand. And I think a couple weeks ago, I saw this comparison that someone had put on LinkedIn between the like well-known founder, like the people that you're, you know, mentioning, and then their company, and just the amount of followers on each, and how with the actual person, it's just so much higher. There's so much more engagement. So I do think it's like a very interesting direction to go in if you are one of those founders that's, you know, sees themselves as a thought leader, has really interesting things to say about the space that they're in. But you're right to also note about like it has to be sustainable. And I think that's something that people maybe don't realize going into it, where they see all these other, I don't know, I want to call them like LinkedIn influencers now. But they see all these people like building really big audiences and posting a lot and like building their personal brand. But it's actually a lot of work that goes into it. And like just you have to post so regularly, and you have to really be, doing like the video stuff as well. If you really want to like drive up engagement, that's such a huge thing. What do you think is like a good place to start if you are a founder that wants to get into kind of more the like founder-led branding for their startup?
Yeah. Well, first I would say that I differ from some other people with this, but I think that like done is better than perfect, especially with social media or content. I always use this phrase MVP as in minimum viable posting. So like if you post once a month, that's better than like not posting at all, right? If you decide to post on LinkedIn. Because I think some people get really hung up with like, oh, I have to have this regular schedule and I have to be doing all these things to like optimize. And so I think that there are ways to get benefits from doing this stuff without having to like optimize it. Obviously, you're going to get better results if you go out and optimize or whatever. But I think that done is better than perfect. So like just get started rather than like overthinking it. The other thing I would say is try to ask yourself what channel feels most natural to me. So some people, they do like being on video and they like making video, and that's great. Another trend that I'm seeing these days that I find really interesting is founders who have newsletters, especially on Substack. I find that really, really interesting because they're basically people who are like, oh, I feel more comfortable writing. This feels a little more intimate, a little more personal than going out and posting on LinkedIn or Instagram or whatnot. And it's really interesting because they're taking these approaches like giving more behind the scenes. It's almost like a build in public type approach. So I find that really interesting. So I always try to ask founders to like, what do you feel most comfortable on, or like what channel do you have the best relationship with? Because I think again it goes with that like sustainability of keeping it up and what's gonna and also where like you're gonna feel most natural, right? Like some people are terrible on camera and some people are terrible at writing, or so it's like what is the thing that you feel best on, and explore that channel versus like trying to do everything on all of them or push yourself into a box that doesn't feel very good to you.
I think that's such a good point. That kind of feels like a misconception of like social media as well, that you like need to do the social media piece like you see other people doing it to like be in the game. But you're so right. There's all these other ways to also like build your personal brand, or I almost like hate that word, to be honest. But just to like show people who you are and promote yourself and have people, find out about you, connect with you. I think something that I've been seeing a lot more, and I don't know if this is mainly in the space that I'm in right now, which is like HR tech, but I think it's happening kind of in different industries, is people writing more long form content, like an actual book, for example. I think we've kind of like tested out so many, I don't know, lead generation content, like playbooks and kind of these like shorter to digest pieces of content. We're like making our blog posts shorter than ever and just making them super skimmable. And I think there's people that are kind of doing like the anti short form right now as well, and seeing that as a different approach where they're really writing like a full book and taking a more traditional PR route with it, whether, like showing up at conferences and doing book signings. And I don't know if that's, like a counterculture against what we're doing with social media right now, where everything has to be like bite-sized, but that's something that I've seen a lot. Are there any companies that you work with that are kind of taking that approach too?
Oh my gosh, that's so true though. There's so many channels that are outside of the norm. I actually have this list bookmarked on my computer of like all the marketing channels, and I often refer back to it because I always like forget about certain ones because you just think of like the ones you see every day. But yeah, founders could look at like books or like giving speeches at conferences or writing guest articles, like Forbes has like guest contributors, like all of that. Those are options as well. If you're like, I don't want to have any of my own social media, whatever, like there's so many alternative channels. I always remember I listened to a talk by Wistia, the video platform company. And they said they invest actually in these like really, really long videos. Like I think they were like 30-minute plus. And they said, yeah, fewer people will like hit play on a long video, But if they do watch it, those were people that paid attention to us for like, yeah, 30 minutes to an hour versus like maybe you get a ton of impressions on like a TikTok, but they watched it for like 2 seconds. So you have to like, I think that's one of the hard things is looking at the numbers because people get really caught up in like the immediate numbers. But like someone who gives a speech at a conference in front of, I don't know, like 100 people, those 100 people were like listening to you in like a much warmer capacity than like just scrolling past you online. So I always think it's good to remember to look at like the numbers that actually matter too, but it can be hard when it's like an investment of time. I'm trying to think of other non-traditional like companies I'm working with that are doing something different. I don't have like a specific example, but with one of my clients, we did start to like build back up their newsletter regularly, like every 2 weeks, and it comes directly from the founder. We work together on it, but it's this very like personal way to talk to the people on the email list, and that's been going really well in comparison to like just doing like marketing promo emails. People have been reacting really well to that. I get this email by a clothing store in New York that specializes in like sustainable clothing. And I noticed that they had this like big kind of like long text intro to the email, which is not what you would like typically see in a marketing email. And they would be talking about like new brands they added to the shop and new styles they're thinking about. And it was this very cool like behind the scenes look into like how they decide to sell what they sell versus just like look at this pretty dress. And I thought, and I would love to see more stuff like that. Like what is the behind the scenes on everything? I also follow all these like small business owners on Instagram that really show like the behind the scenes of the day in, day out business. I think that stuff is really fun and people are curious about.
Yeah, actually, it's interesting you said that about Wistia as well, because I don't know if you use HubSpot with any of your clients for like their marketing platform, but they recently launched they're calling it a content hub, and it's basically just a bunch of their features with then also like AI and podcasting and all these things combined. And they were trying to sell me on it, and the guy sent me a video that was like 30 or 45 minutes long. And it took me a while to actually find the time to watch it. So initially I was like, why is this is such a long video. I don't think I can even make the time for it. But then once I started watching it, it was so interesting that I watched the whole thing through, and we got the thing. We added it onto our plan. So I don't know, it's just interesting. Like, you expect to always get like the shortest version of something, but it doesn't always really capture your attention in the same way or really like help you, I don't know, convince you to like buy this thing or to learn more about this product. So I don't know, I think it's good to experiment with both versions. Like right now, what we're doing a lot of webinars, which are super long. They're like an hour long, and we have people engage for the whole thing. Like we have super low drop off, which is really interesting. But then we also do a lot of like shorter 1 to 2 minute clips from those webinars or other video content that people also seem to like. So maybe experimenting with both types, or like you said, the newsletters that have a little bit more of like a personal touch, but then adding like regular marketing emails into the mix, kind of like doing both and seeing what resonates.
Yeah, definitely. And people consume content in such different ways, you know, like I have a friend who like never opens a newsletter, but she like loves YouTube. So,
Right.
so that's like also important to think about too, is like once you get to the point where you can add in like additional resources, it's like, oh, can we put this in a different format that's like completely different, you know, because maybe it'll capture someone else.
Yeah. I think I have one final question about branding, which is, at what point do you feel like a company should hire someone who specializes in branding, or should they ever hire someone full time or more of a contractor? Like, what do you think there?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, they should definitely hire someone full time at some point. I think that in the beginning, it's better to use, and I'm not just saying this because I work for myself, but I do think it's better to hire a consultant or a freelancer in the beginning, or a small agency or studio, to kind of like problem solve some of those like bigger pieces. But make sure that whatever work you're doing is something that's like in formats that you're going to use it day to day, and that they like really understand how your team is made up, and like some of the pain points of like the day to day marketing and branding challenges, because you want to get deliverables that you're actually going to like refer back to. Because one of the problems I see is people like invested a lot in like in some sort of brand work, and then they don't actually use it because maybe it wasn't like the right time or the right format for that brand work. So I would definitely say utilize more consultants, studios, agencies, freelancers in the beginning. When is a good time to, let me actually think about this. I would say that once you are moving beyond just having like a generalist marketing person on your team, and you're starting to think about like maybe you hire them like a growth marketer, I think then it's a good time to have someone who has like a sort of counterbalance. I think you need a balance of the growth side and like the brand and comms side. I think if you just have like one or the other, you're probably missing something. And those people have such different like growth and brand and comms are so different now, that I really think by not having one side of that, you're probably missing an important perspective.
I completely agree with that. I think sometimes it's easy if you're just doing growth, you're like super focused on the numbers, which is really important. But sometimes you're, like pushing so hard in that direction that you end up losing like that brand identity that you've been building, or, investing in content that doesn't like automatically convert to a qualified lead, but it, nurtures people and makes people comfortable with your brand. And then when they're ready to buy, that's when, the growth side can really like capture them. But there's all this stuff beforehand in the customer's journey that you would be missing out on if you don't have someone like that.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Well, I really enjoyed this conversation. I have one last question to kind of round it off, which is, what's something that you're excited about in both your personal as well as your professional life right now?
Well, in my personal life, I'm excited because we just moved I was in Sao Paulo for 5 years, which is a huge city. I mean, it's the biggest city in the Southern Hemisphere. And we just moved to this small beach town called Paraty here in Brazil. And so like just a totally different change of pace and day-to-day life, and like having nature, and I don't know, it's completely different. So I'm very excited about that. On the professional side, I'm very excited about what I mentioned at the beginning, that I launched this joint venture with a designer friend, Libby Connolly, called the Office of Beloved Brands. And working for yourself, for me, I really, really crave collaboration with other people and being on a team. And so it's been really fun. We just launched in April, and we've had a few clients, and it's been so fun to work with someone else and get to approach it from a little more, like I said, that holistic brand perspective of the visual and the verbal side of things. So yeah, those are two things I'm excited about right now.
That's super fun. I'm slightly jealous of where you're at, but I'll live vicariously through your pictures from. It looks like such a beautiful little town where you ended up in, and also excited to see more of this new project that you're working on. Where can people connect with you? What's the best place for people to find you if they want to connect?
Well, my website is brandbybrandy.com, and I have a Substack there that you can sign up for a newsletter. And that's probably the best way to keep in touch. I like to send out every 2-ish weeks. I'll send out sort of thoughts on like a main topic, and then some little brand bits and bobs of news going on that I think is interesting, or resources. And I try to keep it very casual, so that it doesn't feel like some, I don't know, boring homework is landing in your inbox. I try to approach it more like I'm like chatting about brand stuff with a friend. So you can sign up there.
I honestly love your Substack. I think it's such a good,
Thanks.
if anyone's like thinking of starting a newsletter too, I think it's a great like inspiration or like template that you can follow, because I feel like you have that perfect balance of like actual interesting content, but then also your personality shines through. So I'm a big fan.
Oh, thank you.
Awesome. Well, Brandy, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'm excited to keep following the things that you're doing. And yeah, I will see you guys on the next one.